like to move to the next presentation by Rosalie Mendoza from University of Philippines on the topic of wood identification, a tool for preservation of indigenous architecture of traditional houses in Ifugao, Philippines.
Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you, whichever applies to your time zone. I am Rosalie Mendoza and I'm the next presenter this evening. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers of this virtual symposium for carefully planning this program. I personally experienced that virtual symposium is as difficult as a face-to-face symposium. Sometimes it's even harder. So thank you all for your hard work. Secondly, I want to express our sincere gratitude to the World Wood Day Foundation and the International Wood Culture Society for choosing our proposal as one of the grantees of the 2019 Research Grant Award. Due to different research priorities in our country, the Philippines, which is also related to limited available resources, studies about cultural heritage, especially those about conservation, preservation, or restoration of built heritage, just like the Ifugao traditional houses, is not abundant in our country. Mostly, researchers secure funding from international organizations to implement projects like ours. Thank you so much, WWDF and IWCS, for making this a dream come true for me. The team believes that our project is a pioneering study to really dig deep, go to the field, get our hands dirty, literally of course, and wounded, thanks to our mighty cutters and the sharp grasses in the forest where we did our field work, to really identify the wood species used in the construction of the Ifugao traditional houses. We consider this as the team's significant contribution that will be forever inculcated in the scientific documentation of the rich Ifugao heritage. Aside from documenting the species, the information will also serve as references for the younger generation of indigenous craftsmen in relation to the properties of the wood species that they should use in building their traditional houses. Lastly, we found that through this project, we can also recommend programs to ensure the sustainability of the species that the older builders use. Plans to sustainably cultivate and utilize these species can also ensure that this part of the Ifugao heritage will stay with the Ifugaos generations after generations. Nobody wants to lose a part of him or herself. We do not want to lose something valuable and get no hold of it forever. This is how we feel about the Ifugao traditional house. We hope that through this study, we can somehow make ways to make it stay for the future generations to witness. So I prepared a pre-recorded video. May I ask the Secretariat to kindly play my video? Thank you. Mendoza, and on behalf of the team, I would like to present our research project entitled Wood Identification, a tool for preservation of indigenous architecture of traditional houses in Ifugao, Philippines. This project was funded by the World Wood Day Foundation, a recipient of the 2019 Research Grant Award. This is the outline of my presentation. Let me give you a virtual tour going to our study site because everything is virtual now. This is the Ifugao Rice Terraces, located at the Cordillera Mountain in the northern Philippines. For you to experience the Ifugao Rice Terraces, I prepared a short video. And it is part of who the Ifugaos are. And this is the main topic of our research project, the Ifugao traditional house, scattered along the rice terraces. These are the parts of the Ifugao traditional house. You have here the foundation parts, the floor frames and the floor parts, the wall frames and the wall boards, the roof frames and the roof parts. And these are the looming concerns related to the Ifugao traditional house. there is an obvious decline in the number and use of these houses due to modernization. Most of the houses that were surveyed are abandoned, and only few families are actually living in these houses. And another concern is the lack of studies that concentrate on the wood species used in building these houses. And how can wood identification help in preserving this cultural heritage? Through wood identification, we can enhance local knowledge in identifying the wooden components of the traditional Ifugao houses in support of new construction and restoration efforts. And wood identification can also identify the wood species that have historical and cultural value and can be used by local communities in promoting the environmental sustainability through the protection, propagation, and cultivation of the species used in building these houses. The objectives of our study: we identify the wood species used in the construction of the houses built in certain periods, and we also recommended actions for the conservation of the traditional houses through the participation of multi-stakeholders. This is how we did the study. So we randomly selected houses according to the period when the houses were built. We have 4 categories. And these are some of the houses that were randomly selected. We sampled standing. At the same time, we also sampled dismantled houses like this. So as you can see, the dismantled houses were much easier to identify than the standing houses. We then identify the species using the physical and structural features. So this is what we experienced in capturing the cross-section image of the standing houses, and here the dismantled houses. To capture the images, we use the USB microscope and a laptop to document the transverse section of the wood. We then verify the identities of the species using identification database like Inside Wood, handbooks, silarium specimens, and actual leaf and wood samples collected from the field surveys. And this is what we gathered. We identified 32 wood species belonging to 32 wood species belonging to 22 genera in 17 families. And most of these species used in the construction are naturally growing. 53% are endemic, indigenous 38%, and the remaining are introduced species, which were utilized during the most recent period. There are species that were not observed to be utilized during some period ranges, probably due to the unavailability of these sources, as implied by its conservation status. So later I will show the table bearing the conservation status of each species that we identified. Most of the species used in the earlier periods are categorized as premium species in the Philippines, reflecting the abundance of these species in the earlier times. So I will briefly browse the cross-section images of the species that we identified. The more terms that you see here, that means these species were used in this part of the house. So from Canabaceae, family Cononiaceae, we have several dipterocarp species. We have Ericaceae, of course, Pterocarpus indicus, which was dominantly used in building houses in the earlier years. Pagaceae, Hypericaceae, Gemelina arborea, Lamiaceae, which we found in houses built in the most recent period, like Pterocarpus indicus, Vitex corviflora, was also present in the houses that were built in the earlier periods. And We found it in many parts of the house. We also have Cryptocarya species from Lauraceae, several Lauraceae species. This one is also Lauraceae, this one, and this one. We also have Baliaceae species. Mahogany, just like Chimelina arborea, an introduced species. We identified it in houses recently built. We also have Moraceae family, several Moraceae species. And this one, I would like to give emphasis to this because this is a very dense wood species, which we found to comprise the houses built in the earlier periods also. And it was consistently used as house post. It was very hard and it was very difficult to scrape the cross section of this wood. We also have Syzygium species from Myrtaceae family, Phyllantaceae, and we identified two softwood species, Tobiaceae family and Sapotaceae species. Studies about conservation status of the species being used in the construction of Ifugao traditional houses should be done. Immediate propagation of endangered, critically endangered, and vulnerable species should also be done. And we should also educate the local communities about the cultural and environmental sustainability of this species in the relation to its use in Ifugao traditional houses. Why did we conclude this? In this table, you will see the conservation status of these species that we identified. And most of the endemic species, their conservation status are not yet evaluated. So there is really a need to study the conservation status of these species before it is too late. And as you can see here, most of the premium species that were used in the earlier periods were critically endangered, are critically endangered now or vulnerable or endangered. In this table, you will also see the presence of the species in certain periods. So if you will see many checks, that means these species are still consistently being used up to now. But there are species like this one, Trema orientalis, Sharia stilosa, surprisingly, they are being utilized recently. For Nara and Nara, Dracarbus indicus, and Vitex parviflora, Molave, you can see that the houses were composed of these species from 1930s and earlier up to 1990s. But during the recent period, the most recent period, we did not find any Nara or Molave components in the houses. The conclusions and recommendations. We believe that this study is the first attempt to identify the wood species used to actually identify, because there are several literatures listing the species that are being used in the construction of Ifugao houses. But this is really the first to do the dirty work, to really scrape the cross section and look into the physical and structural features to identify it. And we believe that this is a modest contribution to the indigenous knowledge to make this cultural heritage alive for the future generations to witness. Mostly endemic and indigenous species were used in building the houses, especially in the earlier periods. And with the decline in the availability of the premium species, other non-premium species are now being used to build the houses. And there is really a need to conserve this cultural heritage and at the same time ensure the sustainability of the species that were earlier used in building the house. So these are the references that we use for this study. We would like to also thank the following: the World Wood Day Foundation, the International Wood Culture Society, Mr. Raimundo Dong-e, Mr. Patrick Pulpog, the local government and people of Yangan Ifugao, and the Forest Products Research and Development Institute, Department of Science and Technology. So let me end with a quote: far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. And we believe that conserving this cultural heritage is one work worth doing. With that, thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for this very valuable, important research. I guess I'm curious. Seems like for the past, since the records for the past, I don't know, 80 years or so after 1930, right, start to have this research, that the migration or the change of the species that is used for building these houses must have a pattern, I assuming. The main structure, because there are different parts, the main structure, the partition, the floor, and so on. So the endangered species that been replaced by other species, are they mainly the structure part, or are they mainly what part of it? And so how crucial it is, because you talk about you are the way to go to move forward is to sustain those material or wood species that is needed, right? Then I wonder, are these feasible? Are those species that need to be sustained or through rehabilitation plan? Are they available? Are they available around the houses, and so they can continue or to use it or to replace it with even earlier materials? I mean, it's a general question, but I'm just thinking how after the study, what action can be actually do to help conserving the way we build these traditional houses.
Thank you for that question, Professor Wang. So our counterparts, my co-members from the team, actually conducted a conservation planning workshop, which was presented yesterday. They met with the stakeholders to do an action plan about the conservation of these species, these endangered or critically endangered species. So I believe the municipality of Ifugao is actually planning and hopefully implementing this the outputs of their conservation planning workshop. For your question, if some species were used as posts and then it is not being used now, or they substituted the species. Yes, for example, the post that earlier they earlier used Cereblus glaber as post, but now they use other species because of the unavailability of these resources. So uh, for the conservation planning aspect, the IFSU, the Ifugao State University members are, I know, doing their part in making sure that the workshop will the outputs of the workshop will be put into reality.
Thank you. I wish this you continue the study and then help to have action plan to help conserve these valuable houses. Thank you.